Have you ever noticed how, after a relationship ends, your brain starts playing tricks on you? Suddenly, you can't stop thinking about that person. You replay old conversations. You stalk their social media. You wonder if they miss you. You start romanticizing everything. The late-night calls, the inside jokes, the trips, the little moments that used to feel so special. And your mind keeps telling you, maybe they were the one. Maybe I'll never meet someone like that again. Maybe I made a huge mistake. But here's the uncomfortable truth most people don't want to hear. A lot of people are not heartbroken because they lost someone they truly loved. They're heartbroken because their ego can't accept how things ended. They're not devastated because the person is gone. They're devastated because the story didn't go the way they expected. That's where emotional exhaustion begins. That feeling of being unable to move on, that constant replaying of memories, that obsession with closure. A lot of it comes from one thing. You're not in pain because of love. You're in pain because of unfinished expectations. And that's a huge difference. Think about it. When people say, I miss them so much, what they often really mean is, I miss who I thought they would become. I miss the future I imagined. I miss the life I thought we were building. That future might have included marriage, kids, traveling together, growing old together, building a home. Or maybe it was simpler than that. Maybe you just thought, this person finally understands me. This feels safe. This could actually last. And when that future disappears, it feels like someone stole something from you, even if that future never actually existed. That's why breakups can feel so brutal. You're not just grieving a person. You're grieving an imagined future. And that imagined future can feel very real, sometimes even more real than the actual relationship, because imagination is perfect. Reality isn't. Reality includes arguments, miscommunication, disappointment, red flags, incompatibility, emotional immaturity, different life goals. But after the breakup, your brain conveniently edits those parts out. It creates a highlight reel. Only the good moments remain. And suddenly you start thinking, it wasn't that bad. We were actually happy. Maybe we could have fixed it. Meanwhile, your brain completely ignores the nights you cried yourself to sleep, the disrespect, the constant stress, the uncertainty, the emotional instability. Why does this happen? Because your brain hates loss, and it especially hates rejection. If someone leaves you, your ego gets involved. Now it's no longer just sadness. It becomes, why wasn't I enough? Why did they choose someone else? How could they move on so fast? What did I do wrong? And that's where things become dangerous. Because now you're no longer trying to heal. You're trying to win. You want them to regret leaving. You want them to come back. You want proof that you mattered. You want validation. And that desire can trap people for years. Some people don't miss their ex. They miss feeling chosen. Some people don't want the relationship back. They want their pride back. That's why people stay emotionally attached to situations that were clearly unhealthy. Not because the relationship was amazing, but because losing feels humiliating, especially when you invested a lot. Time, energy, loyalty, sacrifice. Maybe you changed your plans for them. Maybe you ignored red flags. Maybe you fought for the relationship while they slowly checked out. And now your mind says, I gave so much. I need this to mean something. That's the trap. You start treating relationships like investments. I already spent 3 years. I already gave everything. I can't walk away now. But love doesn't work like that. Just because you invested heavily doesn't mean the relationship was right. And staying stuck won't recover your losses. It only creates new ones. More wasted time, more anxiety, more emotional damage. At some point, you have to ask yourself, do I actually miss this person? Or do I miss the version of life I created in my head? Do I miss them? Or do I hate losing? Do I want love? Or do I just want closure?
Those questions can change everything. Because healing starts when you become brutally honest. Maybe they weren't your soulmate. Maybe they were just a chapter. Maybe they came into your life to teach you boundaries, self-respect, communication, patience. Or maybe they showed you what you should never tolerate again. That lesson still has value. Not every relationship is meant to last forever. Some relationships are temporary teachers, and that doesn't make them meaningless. It makes them part of your growth. The truth is, you can appreciate what someone gave you without forcing them to stay in your life forever. You can be grateful for the memories while accepting the ending. That's maturity. That's emotional growth. And that's how you stop draining yourself over something that already ended. Because at the end of the day, the hardest part isn't losing someone. The hardest part is accepting that life didn't go according to your plan. But life doesn't always give you what you wanted. Sometimes it gives you what you needed. And years from now, you may look back at the person you begged to stay and feel grateful they left, because their absence forced you to become stronger, smarter, more self-aware, and more emotionally independent. Sometimes the relationship ending is not your life falling apart. Sometimes it's your life redirecting itself. And the moment you stop confusing attachment with love, that's the moment you finally start moving on.
One of the biggest mistakes people make after a breakup, betrayal, friendship fallout, or any painful relationship experience is believing their emotions are telling them the full truth. They're not. Emotions are real, but they are often temporary. And when emotions get intense, your perspective gets distorted. That's when people start saying extreme things like, "They never cared about me. Our entire relationship was fake. I wasted years of my life. They ruined me." And sure, sometimes people genuinely hurt you. Sometimes betrayal is real. Sometimes disrespect is real. Sometimes walking away is absolutely necessary. But what happens a lot of the time is this. People experience one painful ending and suddenly rewrite the entire story. They erase every good memory. They act like nothing meaningful ever happened. And that mindset keeps people trapped in bitterness. Why? Because anger feels powerful. Bitterness feels protective. If you convince yourself that the entire relationship was terrible, then maybe the ending hurts less. At least that's what your brain thinks. Your mind starts building a case against the other person. You replay every mistake they made, every argument, every disappointment, every time they let you down. And eventually, your pain becomes your identity. You become the victim in your own story. And that feels safe, because if they were completely wrong, then you never have to reflect on your own role. You never have to face your own patterns. You never have to ask difficult questions like, why did I ignore obvious red flags? Why did I tolerate things I knew were unhealthy? Why did I stay so long? Why did I confuse attention with genuine love? Why was I afraid to leave? Those questions are uncomfortable, but they create growth. Blaming the other person for everything might feel good temporarily, but it keeps you emotionally immature. And there's another side people don't talk about enough. Sometimes people do the opposite. Instead of demonizing the other person, they glorify them. They act like their ex was perfect. They replay only the beautiful moments, the way they smiled, the way they held me, the trips we took, the way they used to call me every night. And suddenly they forget the mixed signals, the emotional inconsistency, the lies, the disrespect, the stress, the crying, the confusion. Your brain tends to swing between extremes. They were horrible, or they were perfect. But reality is usually somewhere in the middle. Most relationships are complicated. Most people are complicated. Someone can love you and still be emotionally unavailable. Someone can have good intentions and still hurt you. Someone can create beautiful memories and still not be right for your future. That's real life.
And emotional maturity means learning to hold two truths at once. Yes, there were beautiful moments. And yes, this relationship still needed to end. That balance is incredibly powerful, because now you're no longer trapped by hate, and you're no longer trapped by fantasy. You can see things clearly, and clarity is what helps people heal faster. Think about how many people stay emotionally exhausted because they keep reopening old wounds. They check their ex's profile. They watch who liked their photos. They ask mutual friends for updates. They analyze every story post. They create fake scenarios in their heads. Who are they with? Are they happier now? Do they miss me? And every time they do this, they restart their own pain. It's like picking at a wound and wondering why it won't heal. You cannot heal in the same place where you keep emotionally bleeding. At some point, you need to stop feeding your pain. Stop collecting evidence. Stop trying to prove who lost. Stop trying to win the breakup. Because healing isn't winning. Healing is peace. And peace requires honesty. Maybe they hurt you. Maybe you hurt them too. Maybe both of you were simply incompatible. Maybe the timing was wrong. Maybe both of you needed growth. That truth feels less dramatic, but it's usually more accurate. And accuracy helps you move forward. One of the most mature things you can say is, that relationship had beautiful moments. It also had unhealthy patterns. It taught me valuable lessons. And it needed to end. That mindset removes emotional poison. It allows gratitude without attachment, reflection without obsession, memories without suffering. And that's when real healing begins. Because not every ending needs a villain. Sometimes two people simply reach the end of what they were meant to teach each other. And that's okay. Your future gets better the moment you stop letting temporary emotions rewrite your entire life story.
This is where emotional exhaustion gets really dangerous. Because after the relationship ends, after the arguments stop, after the person leaves, the biggest battle usually isn't with them anymore. It's with your own mind. And your mind can be brutal, especially when you're alone, especially at night, especially when everything gets quiet. That's when the endless mental replay starts. What if I said the wrong thing? What if I was more patient? What if I didn't react emotionally? What if I fought harder? What if I gave up too easily? And suddenly your brain turns into a courtroom. You become both the lawyer and the criminal. You defend yourself, then blame yourself, then defend yourself again, then blame yourself harder. It never ends. And that cycle drains people for months, sometimes years. Because overthinking creates the illusion of control. Your brain believes, if I analyze this enough, I'll finally understand what happened. If I replay every conversation, maybe I'll find the exact moment everything went wrong. If I figure it out, maybe I can fix it. But life doesn't always work like that. Sometimes there is no hidden answer. Sometimes relationships end because two people were incompatible. Sometimes people grow apart. Sometimes people carry unresolved trauma. Sometimes they simply weren't ready. And sometimes, people leave without giving you the closure you think you deserve. That's one of the hardest truths to accept. Not every story ends with a clean explanation. Not every goodbye comes with accountability. Not every person gives you clarity. And waiting for them to explain everything may keep you emotionally trapped forever. A lot of people think, if they would just apologize, if they would just admit they were wrong, if they would just give me closure, then I could move on. But that mindset gives someone else control over your healing. And that's dangerous. Your peace should not depend on another person's behavior.
closure is often self-created. It happens when you accept it ended, it hurt, it mattered, and now it's over. That's closure. Simple. Not easy, but simple. But many people resist this reality. Why? Because accepting reality feels like surrender. And people hate surrender. They'd rather keep negotiating with the past. That's why they create imaginary scenarios. Maybe if I text them. Maybe if I run into them. Maybe if I improve myself enough, they'll come back. Maybe this isn't really over. That false hope becomes addictive. It feels better than grief. But it also delays healing. You stay emotionally attached to a future that no longer exists. And meanwhile, real life keeps moving. Opportunities pass. Healthy relationships pass. Personal growth gets delayed. Your happiness gets postponed. All because your mind keeps living in what if. And what if is one of the most dangerous places a person can live. Because there's no end to it. What if I stayed? What if I left earlier? What if I changed? What if they changed? What if we met at a different time? You can torture yourself forever with imaginary timelines. But none of them are real. Reality is what happened. And healing starts when you stop arguing with reality. That doesn't mean pretending you're okay. That doesn't mean suppressing pain. It means accepting facts. The relationship happened. It taught you something. It ended. And now your responsibility is to move forward, not backward. One of the biggest signs you're healing is when you stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and start asking, "What is this experience trying to teach me?" That question changes everything. Now pain becomes wisdom. Loss becomes redirection. Failure becomes education. And emotional suffering becomes temporary instead of permanent. You start noticing patterns. Maybe you ignored red flags because you feared being alone. Maybe you chased emotionally unavailable people. Maybe you lacked boundaries. Maybe you tolerated less than you deserved. These lessons matter. Because if you don't learn them, you repeat them. Different face, same pain. And that's how cycles continue. The goal isn't to pretend the relationship meant nothing. The goal is to stop letting it control your future. Some people lose years replaying one chapter. Don't do that. Your life is bigger than one person. Your story is bigger than one ending. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop searching for answers that no longer matter. Accept what happened. Learn what you need to learn. And give yourself permission to move on. Because peace doesn't come from understanding every detail. Sometimes peace comes from saying, "I may never fully understand why it ended, but I refuse to let it destroy the rest of my life."
A lot of people look at failed relationships like wasted time. They say things like, "I gave them years of my life for nothing. I regret ever meeting them. That relationship ruined me." And in the middle of heartbreak, that mindset feels understandable. Pain makes people see things in black and white. If it didn't last forever, they assume it had no value. But that mindset is incredibly dangerous. Because if every relationship that ends is automatically labeled as failure, then you'll carry bitterness into every future relationship. And bitterness makes healing harder. The truth is, not every relationship is meant to last forever. Some people enter your life for a season. Some stay longer. Some leave quickly. And each one teaches you something different. That lesson might be beautiful or painful, sometimes both. Maybe someone taught you what healthy love feels like. Maybe they showed you patience, support, safety, emotional consistency. Maybe they helped you realize what real effort looks like. And even if the relationship ended, those experiences still matter. They become your new standard. But sometimes the lesson is much harsher. Maybe someone taught you what manipulation looks like, what dishonesty looks like, what emotional neglect feels like, what happens when you ignore your intuition. Those lessons hurt, but they can save you years of future pain. A toxic relationship can teach boundaries. A betrayal can teach awareness. A breakup can teach independence. Pain can become education if you let it. That's where many people get stuck. They become obsessed with what they lost, instead of appreciating what they learned. And that mindset keeps them trapped in victim mode. They replay how unfair everything was, how much they gave, how badly they were treated. And while those feelings may be valid, staying there forever only keeps the wound open. At some point, you have to ask, what did this relationship reveal about me? That question requires real honesty. Maybe you were people-pleasing. Maybe you avoided difficult conversations. Maybe you accepted breadcrumbs because deep down you feared abandonment. Maybe you confused chaos with passion. Maybe you thought being needed was the same thing as being loved. These patterns matter because relationships often expose parts of ourselves we haven't healed yet, and that can be uncomfortable. It's easier to blame the other person entirely. It's harder to admit, I ignored things I shouldn't have ignored. I tolerated things I shouldn't have tolerated. I betrayed my own standards. But that honesty is where growth begins. And growth is how pain becomes useful. Otherwise, pain is just pain. Think about people who repeat the same relationship over and over again. Different person, same story, same heartbreak, same emotional chaos. Why? Because they never learned the lesson from the previous relationship. They only focused on the person, not the pattern. And until the pattern changes, the outcome usually stays the same. That's why reflection matters, not obsession. Reflection asks, what can I do better next time? Obsession asks, why wasn't I enough? Reflection builds your future. Obsession destroys your present. There's a huge difference. And here's another hard truth. Sometimes someone was genuinely good for you, but still not meant for you forever. People can outgrow each other. Life goals can change. Timing can be wrong. Love alone doesn't solve incompatibility. And accepting that takes maturity. Not every ending means someone failed. Sometimes two people simply reached the end of what they were meant to be. And that's okay. You can appreciate someone without forcing permanence. You can say, that relationship brought beautiful moments into my life, and I'm still okay with it ending. That's emotional strength. That's real healing. And that mindset protects you from becoming cynical. Because cynicism is easy. Growth is harder. It's easy to say, love is fake. Everyone lies. Relationships are pointless. That mindset may protect your ego, but it also blocks future happiness. Healthy people don't let one painful chapter define their entire story. They learn, they adjust, they grow, and then they love smarter. That's how emotional maturity works. You stop asking, why did this happen to me? And start asking, how can this make me better? Because every relationship leaves something behind. Memories, lessons, standards, wisdom, sometimes scars. But even scars remind you that you survived something difficult. And survival matters. Growth matters. And one day you may look back at someone who broke your heart,
and realize they also helped build the version of you that finally found peace. Not because they stayed, but because they taught you what you needed before they left.
A lot of people think healing means forgetting. Forgetting the memories, forgetting the person, forgetting the pain. They think one day they'll wake up and feel absolutely nothing. Like the relationship never happened. Like that chapter was erased. But real life doesn't work like that. And honestly, that's not even what healing looks like. Healing is not memory loss. Healing is emotional control. It's being able to remember someone without falling apart. It's hearing their name without your stomach dropping. It's seeing old photos without feeling like your world is ending. It's accepting that something mattered while also accepting that it's over. That's real emotional maturity. But a lot of people delay that process because they keep reopening their own wounds. And most of the time, they don't even realize they're doing it. They check their ex's social media. They reread old messages. They revisit old pictures. They listen to songs that remind them of that person. They ask mutual friends for updates. They purposely go places they might run into them. And then they wonder why they can't move on. That's like ripping off a healing scab every single day and asking why the wound still hurts. You're not giving yourself a chance to recover. You're feeding the addiction. And yes, it can become an addiction because emotional attachment creates habits. Your brain gets used to checking, used to hoping, used to searching for signs. Did they watch my story? Did they post someone new? Do they miss me? Are they happier without me? These questions can consume people. And the worst part? Even when you get answers, they rarely bring peace. If they seem happy, you feel hurt. If they seem sad, you may feel temporary satisfaction, but you're still stuck. If they contact you, confusion returns. If they don't contact you, rejection feels fresh again. No matter what happens, you lose when your healing depends on their actions. That's why boundaries matter after endings. Not because you hate them, not because you're trying to be cold, but because distance creates clarity, and clarity creates healing. Sometimes no contact isn't punishment, it's emotional detox. You're removing constant triggers so your nervous system can calm down. And once that space exists, you start hearing your own thoughts again. You start rebuilding your identity. Because many people lose themselves in relationships. Their routines revolve around another person. Their happiness depends on another person. Their future plans involve another person. And when that person leaves, they feel empty. Not because they lost love, but because they lost structure. That's why rebuilding yourself is so important. Go back to neglected hobbies. Reconnect with friends. Focus on your career. Travel. Exercise. Read. Learn something new. Build a life that feels exciting without needing someone else to complete it. And this part is important. Stop romanticizing closure. A lot of people think one final conversation will heal everything. Sometimes it helps, but often it creates more confusion, more false hope, more mixed signals. Closure is not always something another person gives you. Sometimes closure sounds like this. It happened, it hurt, I learned from it, and I'm moving forward. That's enough. You don't need every question answered. You don't need every apology. You don't need them to fully understand your pain. You need peace. And peace often requires letting unanswered questions stay unanswered. That can feel unfair, but it's freeing. And eventually something beautiful happens. You think about them less, then even less. Then one day, you realize an entire week passed without them crossing your mind. Then a month, then longer. And when they do cross your mind, it no longer feels like emotional chaos. It feels like a memory. That's healing. Not forgetting, not pretending, not hatred, just peace. And peace is powerful. Because once your energy stops going toward the past, you finally have enough energy to build your future. And that future might be far better than the one you lost. But you'll never discover that if you keep reopening old wounds that we're trying to heal. People love saying, just give it time. Time heals all wounds. You'll get over it eventually. And while time does help, that advice is incomplete. Because time alone doesn't heal people. Plenty of people stay stuck for years. Same memories, same anger, same regret, same emotional exhaustion. 5 years later, they're still replaying the same story. Still talking about the same person. Still waiting for an apology that may never come. Still hoping for a different ending. That's not healing. That's emotional paralysis. Time only helps when you stop feeding the pain. And that requires a decision. A decision to stop romanticizing what ended. A decision to stop stalking their social media. A decision to stop waiting for closure. A decision to stop making your past your entire identity. Because some people become addicted to sadness. Not intentionally, but pain becomes familiar. Their heartbreak becomes part of who they are. Their victim story becomes their comfort zone. And leaving that story behind feels scary, because it means facing a new chapter. A chapter where they have to rebuild. A chapter where they have to trust again. A chapter where they have to take responsibility for their own happiness. That's hard, but it's necessary. You cannot create a better future while emotionally living in your past. At some point, you have to accept this truth. That chapter ended, and no amount of replaying it will change the ending. That person may never come back. They may never apologize. They may never fully understand your pain. And life may never give you the explanation you wanted. But your life still continues. That's what matters now. There are still people you haven't met, experiences you haven't had, opportunities waiting for you, a version of yourself you haven't become yet. And you'll miss all of it if you keep staring at a closed door. One of the biggest signs of growth is when you stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and start asking, "What can I build from here?" That question shifts your entire life. Now your focus changes. You start building routines, taking care of your body, protecting your peace, improving your finances, learning new skills, meeting new people, exploring new environments, creating a life so full that the past naturally becomes smaller. That's how real healing works. You don't force yourself to forget. You simply build a future that becomes more exciting than your past. And eventually, the person you once cried over becomes a distant memory. Not because they were meaningless, but because your life kept evolving. And that's something people often misunderstand. Moving on doesn't mean what happened didn't matter. It means you matter too. Your future matters too. Your peace matters too. Your dreams matter too. And maybe one day you'll look back and realize the relationship ending was not the tragedy you thought it was. Maybe it saved you from years of incompatibility. Maybe it pushed you towards self-respect. Maybe it forced you to grow. Maybe it cleared space for something healthier. Sometimes losing what you wanted creates room for what you actually need. And that perspective changes everything. Life is full of unfinished stories. Some chapters end abruptly. Some people leave without explanation. Some endings feel unfair. But your story doesn't end there. That chapter may be over, but the book is still being written. And the best thing you can do now is stop rereading old chapters and start writing better ones. Because your life is far too valuable to be permanently controlled by one painful ending. Let it be a lesson. Let it be a memory. Let it be part of your story. But do not let it become your entire future. And remember this. Some people were meant to stay. Some people were meant to teach. And some people were only meant to prove that you are capable of surviving things you once thought would destroy you.